I remember the evening of May 4th very well. We were not far from the Falklands now, all trying to relax and keep calm, writing a letter, reading a book, that sort of thing. When our troop commander came down the stairs into our mess deck and shouted for attention, I could tell by his expression that he didn't have good news. He hadn't, and he didn't mince his words. HMS Sheffield had been hit by an Exocet missile and had been destroyed. The Sheffield had been on forward radar scouting picket around 70 miles south and east of Port Stanley, when a pair of French-made super-retended fighter bombers from their mainland base of Rio Gallegos spotted her and HMS Yarmouth on radar about 50 kilometers away. The planes headed closer and, at 20 kilometers, fired off a pair of AM-39 Exocet missiles before peeling off for home. One of these missiles locked onto the Sheffield, and the other onto the Yarmouth. The Exocet missile, also French-made and helpfully supplied to the enemy by our garlic-chomping friends across the Channel. It probably slipped their minds that we de-saved their backsides in 2 world wars. Was a brilliant ship killer skimming 6 or 8 feet above the waves at 700 miles per hour. They were hard to detect, destroy, or evade. The Yarmouth saw them coming and deployed chaff, strips of metal designed to confuse the missile's radar. She was saved, but the Sheffield did not react in time, and she was hit immediately. The explosion and subsequent fire killed 22 sailors and left 24 others severely injured. When the troop commander stopped talking, there were a few moments of stony silence, just the humming of the ship's engines, as the full impact of what we had just heard sank in. There was no fucking doubt now. We were at war, good and proper. After the shock, the initial response was one of fear, to be honest. Here we were, crammed into a flat-bottomed troop ship defended by obsolete Bofors anti-aircraft guns. We felt like the sitting ducks we were. What chance would we have of defending ourselves against a modern anti-ship weapon like Exocet when a multi-million-pound state-of-the-art destroyer had just been taken out? Then the fear turned to anger, the perfect antidote. Red, white, and blue blood was pulsing through our veins. We were willing to defend our country's honor to the death. At that moment, as Maggie had said, defeat. The possibility does not exist. The loss made me want to fight, to kill Argentinians. I hated them all. That Sheffield had been built in the shipyards close to my hometown. I remembered how, while she had been under construction, a welder had been killed in a gas explosion. Folk locally had said afterwards that the ship would have no luck, and now their predictions seemed to have come horribly true. I wanted to play my own small part in settling the score. I teach the bastards to sink the shiny chef. It didn't occur to me at the time, but the sinking of the Belgrano would have had the same effect on the Argentine forces, of course. Those super-edited pilots would have been seething after she went down, and watching our frigate burn as they raced for home would have been the sweetest revenge for them. That's the dreadful irony of war. One set of families mourning behind closed doors, another set lining the streets cheering. Back home, the politicians had been talking for weeks, trying to find a diplomatic solution, with various peace proposals being put forward by various people and rejected by one side or the other. The sinking meant all faint hopes of diplomacy had gone. Not that we wanted diplomacy to work now. In the beginning, if the whole crisis had been settled and we had turned around and gone home, I would have breathed a sigh of relief. Not now. Now I would have felt betrayed if I hadn't fought, even though I was scared shitless by the thought of it. The time for hot air was over. The outcome would be decided by bullet and bayonet. All of us were now totally committed to the task ahead. On deck a day or two later, we noticed the Canberra sailing nearby. I could see the paras running around on the ship keeping fit, looking the business. It was a great sight. I realized that we weren't on our own, and I think I also knew then that we would win the war. The thought of facing our paras and marines in battle, well, as the Duke of Wellington said, I didn't know what they were doing to the enemy, but by God, they scared me. It wasn't much fun on the Sergeant with the fear of Exocet attacks still there. Big time, but things could definitely be worse. I could be a teenage RG conscript sitting in the shit and cold, waiting to be disemboweled by a British bayonet. Like a lot of the guys in the last few days of the voyage, my mind was a bubbling pot of thoughts and emotions. My life was in danger now, and, being human, I was scared. But I was proud to be there, and more than anything I didn't want to let anyone down. My mates in the battery, my family and friends, my hometown, the whole of the country. In fact, we all wanted to show the whole world what happened when they messed with the Brits. The strangest things go through your mind as you're sitting there, D-Day getting slightly closer every minute. I remember thinking to myself, I'm glad I got my end away. At least if I die, I won't die a cherry boy. There must have been a few virgins amongst us, though this is certainly not the sort of thing that a soldier would admit, unless he was in a German brothel where, rumor had it, first-timers got a freebie. Sadly, this never worked for me. I thought about home, my family, Carol. I wondered what the lads I'd been at school with were doing now. I thought back over all the shit we'd been through in juniors. The bed blocks, punishment parade, that stream. Days spent scraping the paint off a Brasso tin until only the letters RA were left, making your socks smile in your locker layout, keeping your toothpaste tube rectangular, polishing everything. Polishing, all part of getting me here, getting me to war. Early in May, the SAS and SBS made a daring raid on Pebble Island, a little outcrop north of West Falkland where the Argentinians had set up an airbase. In the style of their origins under David Stirling, they destroyed 11 Argentine aircraft in the attack. A ripple of applause went around the ship as the news of that one filtered out. Nice one, lads, that will give the Argies something to chew on. The Royal Artillery played a part in this raid as Captain Brown was the naval gunfire support forward observer, from 148 Battery to 9 Commando Regent Royal Artillery. He called in the 4.5-inch guns of HMS Glamorgan, directing their shells, and why not let the senior service have a crack at the bastards as well. On the 10th of the month, all the top brass, including GBH, had a chinwag on board HMS Fearless to decide when and where we would go ashore. We didn't know it then. They tend not to advertise these things to the likes of us. But we only had another week at sea until we landed. The location had taken weeks of argument. Luckily for us, there was a man on board who knew his stuff, a major who had commanded NP-8901, the Royal Marines garrison on the islands, prior to the Argentine invasion. He must have drawn the short straw for that job, given that until the first few swarthy South Americans walked ashore there had been much in the way of entertainment on the island. But this was where the sheep shit was hitting the fan now, and his input would have been invaluable. The Argies had concentrated a lot of their troops around the capital, Port Stanley. They clearly thought that we would adopt similar tactics to those that the Yanks would have used, that is to soften them up with bombing from the air for several days, then follow this up with shelling from the sea, and finally launch a good old-fashioned U.S. Marine-style John Wayne, Audie Murphy kick-ass frontal assault beach landing. Sorry, Diego, old bean, not the British way. Instead, we would be landing at a place called San Carlos, 50 miles east. 12 hours to go until D-Day, May 21st, 1982. After weeks of being at sea, we were almost ready. I suppose the longest night of all for any combat soldier is the eve of battle. All our equipment was checked and rechecked a dozen times, sometimes with shaky hands, as orders were given from London to Fearless, to our officers, and then, finally, at the end of a very long chain, to us. Our call sign was to be 3-2 Alpha. We were the 3rd battery in the regiment, the 2nd troop in the battery, and the 1st fire unit in the troop. Bob, our sergeant, laid out the basic plan to us as we huddled round below deck. We would be landing at San Carlos, on the west edge of East Falkland, around 50 miles away from Stanley, which was on the east coast of the island. Phases 1 and 2 of the landing would involve 40 Commando and 2 para securing San Carlos settlement, and for 5 Commando and 3 para taking Ajax Bay, just across San Carlos water, and Port San Carlos, which sat on another inlet around the headland to the north. We were to be Phase 3, getting ashore and digging in with our missiles to provide air cover for the other troops and the ships in the bay, from the Argentinian Skyhawks, Daggers and Mirages, plus their own Pucara close support aircraft, which would be coming at us in waves. Disgracefully, we would be limited to this role during daylight hours because we had not been supplied with a DN-181 blind fire radar system. This would have given us the capacity to fire during hours of darkness when the Mark I eyeball is unfortunately obsolete. At the time, we just shrugged our shoulders and got on with it. But looking back, I feel extremely angry that soldiers can be sent to war and put in harm's way without the best equipment available to protect them and others. We'd used the bloody DN-181 on exercise in Germany when there was no danger, and we weren't even firing live missiles, for goodness sake. Now it mattered, we hadn't been given it. Someone's head, a senior officer, someone at the mod, someone, somewhere, should have rolled. Later, our position at San Carlos would be bombed one night by an enemy Canberra. The guy missed if he hadn't, and he had killed our Rapier detachment. Some pen pusher, whether through penny pinching or just incompetence, would have had our blood on his hands.